Well, economics is called the dismal science for a reason, and I personally think this is one of the reasons why, because in economics we talk about budgets, and we have this thing called a budget constraint, and I'm going to show you what a budget constraint is and talk to you about how the budget constraint ties into our decision making. And so just get ready for a good 10 or 15 depressing minutes because we have to talk about budgets. Let's not lose sight of the big picture. What we're doing here is trying to understand how consumers allocate their own resources when making choices about what to do with their resources, what to buy, what to consume. And it's based on this belief, this viewpoint that economists have, that consumers want to make themselves better off. People want to be happy. They want to be happier tomorrow than they are today. But we can't always get what we want because we don't always have enough resources to get what we want. We don't always have enough money. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find that you get what you need. That was not a quote from a famous economist, of course. We basically do the best we can. We try to optimize under some constraint, and that constraint is our budget. And as always, it's just another example of our scarce resources that need allocating. In this case, your income just happens to be the scarce resource. So what I want to do is I want to draw a graph of the budget, and it looks a whole lot like an indifference curve for perfect substitutes. So we have two goods, and we have this downward sloping straight line, and that line is basically representing our budget. Everything below that line is something we can afford. We have enough money to buy that stuff. Everything above that line is unaffordable. It's not feasible. We don't have enough money to go out and get that thing because it's beyond our grasps. And everything on the line is affordable and it exhausts the budget. What I want you to consider about this is we've already made any decisions at some point in the past about whether we're going to save money or borrow money. We've already allocated our resources among time. We've already earned our money, and maybe it's Friday night and you're going out and you've got $50 in your pocket, or whatever amount you like to put in your pocket when you go out on a Friday night, or whatever amount you happen to have to put in your pocket when you go out on a Friday night. You can't spend more than whatever that amount is, that $50, but you can buy any combination of goods that are less than that. And what I want you to do here, in order to kind of understand how this budget behaves and what we're going to do with this budget, is I want you to pay very special attention to these endpoints where our budget constraints collide with the good A axis and the good B axis. This is our intercept, right? Here, the intercept is QA, meaning if I were to throw all of my income at good A, QA is the amount that I could buy, and that's my income I divided by the price of good A. And it's very important to focus on and fixate on the endpoints here. The other endpoint, by default, the same thing. If I spend all my money on QB, that endpoint's where I'm going to be at, and that point is found just by taking my income, dividing it by the price of good B. Now the next thing to think about is the slope of our budget constraint, and the slope is always just the rise over the run. And so we can roll back to the previous graph and see that the rise is QA on the previous graph and the run is QB. And we're going to substitute QA and QB in for the formula we can use to calculate them, the income divided by the price of A and the income divided by the price of B. So it's a whole lot in one slide. You might want to pause and write it down. Then we're going to do a little bit of math and we're going to rearrange things because we have a fraction on the bottom of a fraction and you can't divide by a fraction, but you can multiply by its reciprocal. So in that middle equation right there on that second row, we're just taking I over PB and flipping it over and multiplying it by our I over PA. That's how you divide by a fraction. And then you end up with an I on top of the fraction and an I on the bottom of the fraction, and those cancel. And that gives us that the slope of our budget constraint is the negative of the price of the good on the x-axis divided by the price of the good on the y-axis, which is exactly opposite of what your intuition tells you that it's going to be. You would have thought PA would have been on top and PB would be on the bottom of that final fraction. And I want you to kind of pause and write that down, that that's actually the opposite. And the reason why it's the opposite is you got to divide by that fraction, which means multiplying by the reciprocal. So understanding how the slope behaves gets to be important as well. Let me ask you a question. What happens if you get a raise? What happens if something happens and your income just goes up by some arbitrary amount? You used to have $50 in your pocket when you went out on Friday night. Now you got $100 in your pocket. Well, if you think about it, the slope of your budget constraint won't change if your income goes up, because there's no income in the slope term, because the slope is prices, right? What will change is the endpoints. So that means you're going to get another budget constraint that looks like this after you get the raise. Your budget constraint is going to shift out in a parallel fashion if your income goes up, and it's a dismal science, so if your income goes down, it's going to shift in a parallel fashion. You can afford more of both goods. The area that is affordable has gone up. You can afford more mix of both goods. So life is good when your budget goes up. I like it when my budget grows. The prices do not change, therefore the slope does not change. The incomes have changed, and the income shows up in the formula I gave you a few slides back for our endpoints here. Okay, so that's where the income shows up, so the endpoints are what's going to change. What happens if a price changes? Let's see what happens. So here we have the indifference curve kind of swinging out from B1 out to B2. And what has happened is you can now afford more of good B. Whatever good B happens to be, you effectively have gotten what feels like a raise because you can buy more of that good. So if you were throwing all your money at good B on the horizontal axis, then you'll be able to buy even more of it, and it opens up your entire choice set now where you can afford more goods because of that change in price. So what caused that? Did the price go up or the price go down? It's counterintuitive. You see the curve or the budget constraint swinging out like that, and you're inclined to think, well, I get more of good B, so the price went up. Well, hang on. No, you get more of good B. That means the price is cheaper. So here, the price of good B has dropped. So we can get more of good B if we're buying just good B. So our maximum affordable quantity of good B went up. The slope is a function of the prices, and the slope changed. The slope is a function of the prices. The price changed, therefore the slope's going to change. So we get a different slope, we get a different intercept on the B axis. Now good A's price didn't change, so that point over where our budget constraint intersects good A's axis doesn't change. Let's look at another example. Well, what do you think happened here? Well, the first thing I want you to notice is your budget got tighter going from B1 down to B2. In this case, the 1 and 2 are timestamps, right? So we're kind of worse off because we can buy less stuff. We basically have gotten our pay cut because the price of one of these goods has changed. Which good? Well, good A is the one that had the price change. And in this case, good A's price went up. So we can basically buy less of good A, and we have fewer choices when we think about mixes between good A and good B. Remember again, the slope's the function of the prices, and when a price changes and the other one doesn't, the slope's going to have to change, and the intercepts are also going to change. The intercept for the good whose price changed is what is going to change. I hope that makes sense to you. I hope that helps you understand how these budget constraints behave. More videos, of course, will be popping up.